Last year, I took a very rare day off, and both myself and my mum took a lovely trip out to Scarborough. I've covered Scarborough before, namely its station and the Spar Express, but I've never talked about how Scarborough has its own traditional and rather non-traditional railway lines. Anyone who knows this town knows that Scarborough is famous for many things: beaches, rock, donkeys, amusements, and the rather impressive cliffs. The cliffs, though, especially in the Victorian era, were a bit of a problem. Many people in this era went to the sea not for pleasure but for recuperation from ailments. It was said that the sea air could help cleanse the body and soul, making you feel refreshed. Despite its bold claim, it had an element of truth. The majority of the travellers were from inner cities, where the smog and pollutants would be a playing factor in respiratory illness. By sampling the fresh, clean air, many people began to feel the difference almost straight away. But if you were ill or dressed in layers of finery, the cliffs could be quite an undertaking, and when the new station opened in 1845 and more people began to descend on the town, something had to be done to move these people quickly, and they turned to the railways to do it. The Scarborough South Cliff Railways opened in 1873 with one goal: opening a railway no one had ever seen before, a cliff railway. It was hoped it would run from the top of the town to a spa complex on the South Bay. The proposed railway's neighbour was the Prince of Wales Hotel, and its new owner just knew how important this railway would be, especially as they saw a real opportunity to boost its own business. So they helped raise money for the project. Construction of the line was passed to the Crossley Brothers firm in Manchester. They were world famous for the gas engine. The firm had a good relationship with famous inventor and machine revolutionist Nicholas Otto, and Nicholas trusted them with the rights to manufacture his latest invention, the atmospheric gas engine. It worked by mixing gas and air in a combustion chamber and then igniting it. Gas engines had huge advantages over steam. They were cleaner, required no warming up, was easy to start, and needed less maintenance. You also don't need to be mechanically inclined or be trained as a fireman to use it. The Crossley Brothers supplied 2 of these gas-powered engines for its railway, not to power the twin cars that would run along it. They were supplied to pump water. The railway was a twin-gauge track 284 foot long with a water pipe running down the middle. The gradient was 1 in 75, with the twin cars supplied by the Metropolitan Railway Carriage and Wagon Company. Underneath each carriage was a triangular tank, and the railway cars were linked together using a system of hydraulics and a cable with a 20-ton braking strain. When the car is at the top station, its tanks were filled with water. Once passengers were loaded, the brakes were removed, and the car at the bottom station started to drain out its own tanks. This caused the car at the top to be heavier and, with the force of gravity, come down the hill, pulling the lower car upwards using the cable. Once each car had reached its station, the brakes were applied and the process would begin again. It was called a funicular railway, and it was simple but ingenious. The railway celebrated its opening day on the 6th of July 1875, and in just that opening day alone, over 1,400 people chose to travel on the line. It was the first of its kind, and it caused a sensation. It was quiet, smooth, and a much better ride than the clunky horse-drawn trams. People were flocking to pay their fee of twopence return, and the queues were abundant. While this railway was successful and working, it had yet to be inspected, and managed to evade the inspectors and the Board of Trade's glare for 3 years. Luckily, the Board of Trade approved and even complimented the company of their smooth operation. Other cliff railways were soon to follow. The short-lived Queen's Parade Cliff Railway opened next. It did not have nearly as much luck as the South Cliff. On its first trials, the cable snapped, sending a car hurtling into the lower station. But after repairs, it was deemed fit to run and had a modest success. But land around the railway was unstable, and the railway was plagued with closures from landslips and mechanical issues. Its north facing meant that it was more open to the harsh sea weather, and the railway simply couldn't keep up. In 1887, a large landslip forced it to close for good, and the railway was wound up later that year. A third railway followed, and undeterred by the woes of the North Cliff, the Central Tramway Company opened its doors in 1881 with founder John Woodall at the helm. He was born and bred in Scarborough, and he had fostered a banking business in the town and worked his way up to mayor 4 times over. John owned a fair bit of land and used this for the new railway. It would be a length of 248 foot long and was constructed on a special framework of iron lattice. The top station would encompass 2 large waiting rooms and a second floor where a relocated photography studio would reside. The bottom station would be a bit small, but just as grand. To power the railway, a steam engine house was built nearby, and a winding engineer had to be on hand. They used old-style winches and pulleys, and because the engineer couldn't see when the cars had arrived at their stations, chalk marks were put on the cable to tell the engineer to stop the machine and that everything was in the right place. It wasn't as neat as the South Cliff, but it worked well. Its opening day was a bank holiday and saw nearly 3,000 passengers through the doors, with the directors reporting everything was satisfactory and the staff sufficient. Very high praise in those days. The last 2 cliff trams to open in Scarborough were owned by the council. The first, the St Nicholas, was set up on the south of the Grand Hotel. It was no frills and had no station building at the bottom. It was opened in 1929 and was driven by electrical power. However, this lift, while still in place, is no longer running and was closed in 2006. Recently, the cars have been fused to the top of the station and the area has been redeveloped into a cafe. And the final was the North Cliff lift. This was built by the Medway Company with the pricing covered by the corporation. It was created during the time the North Bay was seeing redevelopment. Not surprisingly, the Cliff Tram was similar design to the St Nicholas, with a similar electrical motor, and opened just a year after in 1930. It ran well, but in 1997, council cutbacks saw this railway closed temporarily and then for good after estimates to bring the railway up to code was totalling near £75,000 and was operating at a loss. Luckily, while it failed to find a buyer, the railway was preserved and it was donated to the Launceston Steam Railway and Civic Society. The steam railway removed the tram lines, including all the winding engines, and the council landscaped the cliff back to its original condition. While the loss of the 3 cliff tramways was sad, the South Cliff and the Central are still going strong. The South Cliff worked for 60 years before being forced to close for the 1935 season due to much needed maintenance. Hudswell Clark took on the works and added a new electric winding motor and more safety features in the carriages in case of cable failure. The closure sparked concern over the costs, and the next 2 decades proved difficult for the company. In 1966, 6 of the shareholders bought out the others, turning the company into a partnership, and the South Cliff Tramway Company Limited was forced to be wound up. The partnership continued until 1993, when the tramway was sold to the council. The council invested heavily in the railway, making sure it met new safety requirements. It opened briefly in 1997 and 1998. However, the railway suffered a near miss and an accident. These accidents would have been much worse if the council had not made these improvements. The council, reeling from this, closed the tramway down to ensure the maintenance was complete and the tram was safe, and it opened to the public back in 1999, also with a good upgrade to the station shop. The Central Tramway has seen amazing success. It has never changed hands, and the company that founded it is still going strong. It is also the oldest tram operating company in the world. It was converted to electric power in 1920, and in 1967 a new concrete foundation was added. The 1970s, however, brought the railway's first challenges. A fire at the nearby Olympia amusements caused significant damage to the carriages and the tracks, forcing the carriages to be repaired, and when the amusement site was being rebuilt, pile driving caused the cliffs surrounding the site to become unstable. The railway had had enough of this noisy neighbour and took him to court, winning significant compensation for not only the repairs, but the money they had lost from the past year. The railway continued on, with only minor closures for repairs and general maintenance. In 2022, for the first time since 1881, the carriages were removed to be renovated away from sight. They were taken to Wheelsets UK to be fully restored, have new brakes and lights fitted, and have the brakes computer controlled. They were returned a year later to a fully rejuvenated railway ready for the 2024 season. Riding on this unique railway is a real delight, and its large bay windows give a fantastic view over the bay. It does feel a little strange, but it's well worth it. Alongside the Cliff Tramway's lower station, you will find a mini museum, and this was a treasure trove to the railway's history. I can't wait to go back again, because when I get on board from the top station and see the sea from the first time, it really does make me feel like a kid.